What if the oldest story ever told was never meant to be a story at all? Imagine this. The year is 2600 BCE. The wind sweeps across the endless plains of Mesopotamia, whispering through reeds along the Euphrates. Beneath a blazing copper sky stands a city that should not exist. Its walls rise higher than any before it, gleaming in the sun as if the gods themselves laid each brick. This is Uruk, the first metropolis, the cradle of kings, and at its heart sits a figure who defies time. His name, Gilgamesh. To most of us, he is a myth, a demigod hero whose tale of friendship, loss, and the quest for immortality became the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's oldest surviving written story. But what if we've misunderstood it? What if this so-called epic was never meant as legend, but as a record, the fragmented memory of a lost world, rewritten in the language of gods and men? Archaeologists unearthed the clay tablets of Gilgamesh in the 19th century, among the ruins of Nineveh, capital of the Assyrian Empire. There, deep in the royal library of King Ashurbanipal, they discovered lines etched in cuneiform that would shake the foundations of history. Among them, a story of a great flood, a divine council, and a mortal man chosen to survive the end of the world. You know the tale. A righteous man builds a vessel, gathers life within it, and watches the world drown beneath divine wrath. But this was no biblical parable. The tablet describing the flood was written at least 1,000 years before the story of Noah ever appeared. Its survivor wasn't called Noah, but Utnapishtim, a man favoured by the god Ea. So here's the question. If Sumerians told the story first, what event were they remembering? Picture this. An ancient landscape scarred by rivers swollen beyond imagination, coastlines erased, civilizations drowned. Could the Epic of Gilgamesh preserve the echo of a real cataclysm, one that ended an earlier chapter of humanity's story? Mainstream historians argue that the flood in Gilgamesh reflects the seasonal floods of Mesopotamia, the predictable rise and fall of the Tigris and Euphrates. But certain passages hint at something far greater. They describe mountains collapsing, storms so vast they blot out the sun, and a flood that covered the entire known world. The language doesn't speak of metaphor, it speaks of memory. Now step back, look at the timeline. The Sumerians emerge around 4000 BCE, seemingly out of nowhere. One moment, the Near East is dotted with primitive settlements. The next, a fully formed civilization arises, complete with writing, mathematics, astronomy, irrigation, metallurgy, and law. No gradual build-up, no developmental arc, just civilization. And who did they claim taught them these arts? The Anunnaki, those who came from heaven to earth. In Sumerian myth, these were not abstract deities but living presences, beings of radiant power who descended from the skies to establish order and rule. They governed cities, named kings, and passed down laws. The texts call Gilgamesh himself 2/3 divine, descended from the gods. Some researchers dismiss this as metaphor, a poetic way of elevating royal authority. But others ask, what if the Sumerians were describing something literal? What if heaven wasn't the afterlife, but a place of origin, a world beyond our own? Every ancient civilization tells of divine beings who came from the stars, the Watchers of Enoch, the Nephilim of Genesis, the Shining Ones of Egypt. Could they all be fragments of the same lost memory? If so, then Gilgamesh was not merely a king. He was the last scion of a forgotten lineage, born in the twilight between two worlds, the age of gods and the age of men. His story, etched on clay, may be the final message from a civilization that perished beneath the floodwaters of deep time. As we journey deeper, we'll uncover the stones of Uruk, the evidence of the flood, and the mysterious beings the Sumerians called the Anunnaki. But first, we must return to where the story begins, the dawn of civilization itself, when the first city rose from the dust and humanity met its makers. Close your eyes and picture this. The year is 3100 BCE. The dawn sun bleeds over the horizon, gilding the flat plains of southern Mesopotamia. The air hums with heat. In the distance, a colossal wall stretches across the earth, 40 kilometers long, rising as high as a modern fortress. Inside those walls, life stirs. Drums echo through narrow streets of baked brick, Merchants shout in a tongue that was the first written language on Earth, and at the heart of it all towers a ziggurat that pierces the sky. This was Uruk, humanity's first great city, the birthplace of civilization. To the Sumerians, Uruk wasn't merely a city, it was divine architecture. Every street, every temple was a reflection of cosmic order. They said the gods themselves had planned its walls. Its patron deity was Inanna, the radiant queen of heaven, goddess of love, war, and kingship. Her temple, the Inanna complex, glimmered with imported stone and precious metals, a sacred centre where heaven and earth met. And its ruler was Gilgamesh. But what made Uruk so extraordinary was not only its scale, it was its impossible timing. Archaeologically, Uruk appears suddenly. One moment, Mesopotamia is dotted with small Neolithic villages. The next, a full-fledged metropolis erupts, complete with advanced agriculture, trade networks, mathematics, and writing. It's as if a civilization simply switched on overnight. Archaeologists call this leap the Uruk expansion, a mystery that has baffled historians for decades. From roughly 4000 to 3100 BCE, Uruk transformed the world. Colonies bearing its artifacts and iconography appeared hundreds of miles away, in Syria, Anatolia, and even along the Levantine coast. Uruk wasn't just a city, it was the heart of an empire, radiating knowledge like ripples in a still pond. How did this happen so quickly? According to the Sumerians, they didn't invent their civilization, they inherited it. Their tablets tell us the gods descended from the heavens, bringing with them the me, or divine decrees, laws governing civilization itself, kingship, writing, art, warfare, agriculture, and wisdom. The Anunnaki didn't teach one thing at a time, they delivered a complete blueprint. In one ancient hymn, Inanna herself boasts, "I, Inanna, have brought the me of kingship, the me of truth, the me of wisdom, gifts from the abode of the gods." Mainstream scholars interpret this as mythic symbolism, a poetic way to express the birth of culture. But if we strip away the metaphor and read it as memory, it begins to sound like something else. A transfer of knowledge, perhaps from an older forgotten civilization destroyed by Cataclysm. Could Uruk have been built upon the ashes of that lost world? Consider the evidence. Beneath the city's oldest layers lies a stratum of silt and clay, the unmistakable signature of a massive flood. Archaeologists found it sealing earlier ruins, a clean slate upon which a new civilization was born. The dating, around 2900 BCE, the exact period the Sumerians themselves claimed their antediluvian kings perished in the Great Flood. The flood that cleansed the world, and the flood that birthed Uruk. Now imagine the survivors of that catastrophe, wanderers who remembered the technologies and wisdom of their drowned homeland. When they reached the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, they rebuilt, guided by memory and perhaps by mythic reverence for those they called the gods. To the Sumerians, their kingship descended from heaven. To us, it may have descended from a civilization wiped from history. But the strangeness doesn't end there. Inscriptions describe Gilgamesh himself as a demigod, 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. His strength was beyond mortal measure. His mother was Ninsun, a goddess. His father, a high priest of Uruk. This dual heritage wasn't metaphorical to the Sumerians. It was lineage. They recorded the bloodlines of the gods and their offspring with the same precision we reserve for dynasties. So who, or what, were these gods? Were they ancient rulers mythologized over time? Or, as some propose, were they visitors, celestial beings who once walked among men? The Epic of Gilgamesh hints that the gods dwelled not merely in the heavens above, but in mountain realms and celestial gates. The hero himself journeys beyond the known world to seek them. These aren't realms of imagination, they're geographies, coordinates encoded in myth. And so we face an uncomfortable question. Did Uruk's meteoric rise occur because humanity suddenly evolved, or because someone returned and showed them how to rebuild? In the next section, we'll follow the trail into the clay itself, to the earliest cuneiform tablets, the Sumerian king list, and the first hints of a civilization that ruled before the flood. A civilization that should not have existed. Beneath the sands of southern Iraq lies a mystery carved in clay, a document so ancient, so impossible, that it blurs the boundary between myth and memory. It's known simply as the Sumerian King List. At first glance, it seems straightforward, a chronicle of rulers, dates, and dynasties. But read it closely, and the illusion of history fractures. The list begins not with human kings, but with divine ones. The text declares, after kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. Eridu, the first city, the place where civilization began. According to the tablets, this kingship was not invented on Earth. It was bestowed from the heavens, and the rulers who reigned before the Great Flood, the so-called antediluvian kings, did not rule for decades or centuries, but for tens of thousands of years. One king, Alulim of Eridu, is said to have ruled for 28,800 years. Another, Alalgar, for 36,000. 8 kings in total ruled before the deluge, reigning for a combined 241,200 years. And then, the text says, the flood swept over. After the flood had swept over, kingship descended from heaven a second time. To modern ears, this sounds absurd, mythological exaggeration, or perhaps a symbolic way of describing long dynastic reigns. But the problem is this: the Sumerians were meticulous record keepers. They measured time precisely, using sexagesimal mathematics and astronomical observation. Their numbers weren't random, they were deliberate. So why record such impossibly long reigns? Some historians argue these figures encode astronomical cycles, or encode symbolic numerology. But others see something deeper, an echo of a pre-human era when those the Sumerians called gods walked openly among men. Let's linger on that word, Anunnaki. In Sumerian, it means those of royal blood, or those who came from the heavens. The texts name them individually: Anu, lord of the sky; Enlil, god of air and authority; Enki, the wise one, master of the deep waters. Together they formed a divine council, ruling over the fates of both gods and mortals. In one of the oldest tablets ever found, Enki speaks to humankind directly. We have fashioned you from the clay of the earth. Your purpose is to serve the gods. To serve the gods. According to Sumerian myth, humanity wasn't born by chance or by divine love. We were engineered for labour, created by the Anunnaki to relieve the gods of their toil, moulded from clay mixed with the blood of a god. In modern eyes, it reads disturbingly like a description of genetic manipulation, the fusion of divine essence and earthly matter. Could this be the origin of the belief that Gilgamesh himself was 2/3 divine? Was he a remnant, the last hybrid descendant of the Anunnaki line? Archaeologists have found physical evidence that suggests something did happen in Mesopotamia around 2900 BCE, a flood layer that corresponds with the so-called deluge, mentioned in both Sumerian and later Babylonian myths. This layer is real, sediment and clay deposits sealing the older city of Shuruppak, one of the supposed homes of the flood survivor Ziusudra, the Sumerian name for Utnapishtim. The tablets even claim that Ziusudra was granted eternal life by the gods, a gift later sought by Gilgamesh himself. So what are we looking at? An invented mythology? Or the fossilized memory of a real disaster retold and deified over millennia? Imagine survivors of a world-ending flood, wandering across a shattered landscape, clinging to the memory of a lost age. As centuries pass, their descendants elevate those memories into gods, transforming history into legend. But perhaps not everything was lost. Perhaps fragments of the old knowledge endured, preserved in stone, encoded in rituals, whispered through priestly lines. When kingship descended from heaven a second time, it began in Kish, then Uruk, where Gilgamesh would one day reign. It's as though the Sumerians themselves believed civilization was not reborn, but rebuilt. The king list then becomes not myth, but a record of 2 eras, before and after the deluge, 2 cycles of civilization, 2 worlds. And here lies the haunting possibility: if the flood truly marked the end of a previous age, then what other traces of that world lie buried beneath our feet, beyond the reach of history, waiting to be rediscovered? In the next section, we'll follow the trail into the deep past, into Eridu, the first city, home of the god Enki. There, in ruins older than Uruk itself, we may find the blueprint of civilization, and perhaps the fingerprints of the gods. Before Uruk's walls rose to touch the sky, before Gilgamesh reigned as the last of the divine kings, there was Eridu. The Sumerians called it Eridug, the home of the Mighty One. To them it was the first city ever built, and in their oldest myths, it wasn't founded by men, but by the gods themselves. According to the Sumerian king list, after kingship descended from heaven, kingship was in Eridu. It is here that civilization as they told it began, and here that the god Enki, lord of the deep waters, established his throne. Archaeologically, Eridu is real. Its ruins lie in southern Iraq near the ancient shoreline of the Persian Gulf, though in those days it wasn't desert. It was a lush wetland world, where river deltas met the sea and the horizon shimmered with water. Beneath the sand, archaeologists have uncovered 18 distinct layers of occupation, stacked like the pages of an ancient book, reaching back over 7,000 years. The earliest layer dates to around 5,400 BCE, long before the rise of Sumerian kingship, long before writing, and long before any other known city. And yet, even in those earliest levels, we find something astonishing. Temples. The heart of Eridu was a sanctuary, the Eabzu, the House of the Abyss, dedicated to Enki. Over time, as the city expanded, new temples were built directly atop the old, one on another, in perfect alignment, for millennia. The result is a literal tower of sacred history, a stairway of devotion stretching from the Neolithic age to the dawn of written history. It's as if each generation knew exactly where the sacred centre lay, a coordinate never forgotten. Who was this Enki that they worshipped for thousands of years? The texts describe him as a god of water, wisdom, and creation. His domain was the Abzu, the subterranean ocean, the cosmic deep. But in the oldest myths, Enki isn't a remote deity. He walks among men, he speaks, teaches, and intervenes. One hymn proclaims, Enki, king of the Abzu, who raises the seed of mankind, who brings the arts of civilization to the land. It was Enki, they said, who designed the first irrigation canals, who taught men how to build cities, who gave them the plans of the world. If we strip away the poetry, this sounds like a technological transmission, an introduction of knowledge that seems far too advanced for its time. Where did it come from? Mainstream historians call Eridu the cradle of the Ubaid culture, a mysterious people who predated the Sumerians but built monumental architecture and practiced agriculture at a scale unmatched anywhere else on Earth at that time. Their artifacts show strange motifs, figures with elongated skulls, large almond-shaped eyes, and scaled reptilian patterns etched into clay figurines. To the academic world, they're simply stylized humans, but to others, they represent something more, the first depiction of the Anunnaki. In the myths, Enki was one of these Anunnaki, a leader among those who descended from the heavens to establish order on Earth. His temple, the Eabzu, was not merely a house of worship. It was described as a place of power, where the me, the divine decrees of civilization, were stored and guarded. The texts list them: kingship, truth, music, warfare, and knowledge of the stars. It is as if Eridu functioned as a cosmic laboratory where divine and human realms met, the literal headquarters of civilization. Then came the flood. In Sumerian texts, Enki is the one who warns the human sage Ziusudra of the coming cataclysm, defying the council of gods to save humankind. When the waters recede, kingship is said to descend again, not in Eridu this time, but in Kish, and later in Uruk. Civilization was reborn, but something fundamental had changed. The gods withdrew. What if this wasn't allegory? What if Eridu represents the last surviving memory of pre-Diluvian knowledge, a fragment of an earlier advanced culture that perished in the flood, preserved only as myth? Archaeological excavations show that around 3000 BCE, Eridu abruptly declined. Its temples were abandoned, its population dispersed. No war, no invasion, just silence, as if its purpose had been fulfilled or forgotten. And then a new power rose on the horizon. Uruk, a civilization reborn from the ruins, carrying with it the same gods, the same symbols, and perhaps the same hidden knowledge once kept in Enki's house beneath the waters. So, if Eridu was the first experiment, the divine prototype, what then was Uruk? A continuation, a replication, or something else entirely? In the next section we travel deep into the house of Enki itself. to the myths of the Abzu, the creation of humankind, and the shocking reason the gods may have made us in the first place. Every civilization asks the same question: where did we come from? For the Sumerians, the answer was already written in clay. Their tablets tell a story not of spontaneous life or divine affection, but of necessity, rebellion, and labour. In the beginning, the gods themselves worked the land. They dug the irrigation canals, dredged the silt, and tilled the soil. For centuries they toiled, until the burden became unbearable. One of the oldest texts, the myth of the pickaxe, records their complaint. The gods bore the toil, their labour was great. The toil of the gods was heavy, their distress was much. And so they gathered before Enlil, lord of the air, crying out for relief. The solution did not come from him, but from his brother, Enki, lord of wisdom and the deep waters. Enki proposed a daring idea: let us create a substitute worker, let man bear the yoke of the gods. According to the myth, Enki and the mother goddess Ninhursag, sometimes called Nintu or Ki, entered the Abzu, the sacred underworld of waters, and there, in the womb of the earth, performed the first act of creation. They took clay from the deep and mixed it with the essence of a slain god. From the flesh of the god let spirit be bound to clay, let man be fashioned, that he may bear the load of the gods. When the mixture was ready, the goddess shaped it by hand. The result? Adamu, the prototype human. He was not born, he was made. To modern eyes, this reads like the poetry of birth, but look again. The text describes the gods assembling, debating, and then performing a physical act of blending divine and earthly substance, something that to an ancient scribe might have looked like a technological operation, a transfusion, a merging of two natures. And that word, Adamu, resonates uncomfortably with another story we know, the Hebrew Adam, the first man, shaped from clay and animated by the breath of God. Could the later biblical authors have inherited an older Mesopotamian memory, stripped of its pantheon but retaining the image of divine craftsmanship? Enki's creation succeeded. Humanity was formed to till the ground and maintain the gods' fields. The texts even describe early humans as mute, wandering creatures, until Enki opened their mouths and gave them speech. Then came an age of plenty. The gods were at ease, humans multiplied, but peace never lasts long in the ancient world. Soon, mankind's noise and growth disturbed the heavens. Enlil, chief among the gods, grew angry. He unleashed droughts, plagues, and finally the Great Flood, seeking to silence humanity forever. Only Enki defied him. In the Atrahasis epic, an older precursor to the Epic of Gilgamesh, Enki secretly warns a righteous man to build a vessel, fill it with seed and life, and survive the coming deluge. When the waters recede, humanity begins anew. This rebellion of mercy divides the gods themselves. Enlil, the stern judge, Enki, the compassionate creator. Two halves of the divine mind, control and wisdom, order and curiosity, and caught between them, us. To the Sumerians, humanity's role was clear. We were servants, caretakers of the gods' world. Temples were not merely houses of worship, but administrative centres, where offerings, grain and records were kept for the sustenance of the divine order. Each city-state was a reflection of heaven, managed by priests who acted as intermediaries between men and gods. But over time, something changed. The texts grow quieter about divine labour and louder about human kingship. Gilgamesh's reign marks this turning point. The gods no longer rule directly. They rule through chosen bloodlines. The humans once created as workers begin to dream of immortality. This transition, from servitude to ambition, is the pulse of the Epic of Gilgamesh itself. Gilgamesh seeks the secret of eternal life, the wisdom of the gods that Enki once guarded in Eridu. His quest is not just personal, it echoes a human longing older than history to reclaim the knowledge we were never meant to possess. What, then, was the true purpose behind humanity's creation? Were we simply labourers in the fields of divine politics, or the inheritors of something far more profound? Perhaps the answer lies not in myth, but in the clay itself, in the archaeological layers of southern civilization, in the inexplicable precision of early Sumerian astronomy, in the way knowledge seemed to bloom from nowhere. If we were made to serve, then somewhere along the way the servants learned the secrets of their masters. In the next section, we follow those secrets into the realm of the stars, where the Sumerians claim their gods came from. the celestial home of the Anunnaki, a mysterious kingdom known as Nibiru. They wrote of it not as myth, but as a coordinate. Nibiru is the star which crosses the heavens. It marks the boundary of the gods. To later Babylonians, it was the bright star of Marduk, the lord of judgment. To modern readers, it became something far stranger, a missing world. Historical context. Cuneiform lists show Nibiru as a point of alignment, a marker where the paths of Jupiter, Mercury and the Sun converge in the ecliptic. To scholars, it was an astronomical term, a symbol of balance and renewal. But in the 20th century, a new interpretation would ignite an entirely different fire. Enter Zecharia Sitchin, linguist, autodidact and the author of The 12th Planet. Sitchin claimed the word Nibiru referred not to a star but to a wandering planet beyond Neptune, moving in a vast elliptical orbit that brought it close to Earth every 3,600 years. According to his translations, it was home to the Anunnaki, a technologically advanced race who came to Earth seeking gold to repair their dying atmosphere. He read the ancient descriptions of gods descending in fiery chariots and shining boats as eyewitness accounts of spacecraft. The Sumerian word Anunnaki, those who came from the heavens to Earth, became literal. Could this be what the scribes meant? A world that crosses ours like a comet, its inhabitants shaping human destiny? Or did Sitchin misread a symbol for a sphere, myth for map? Astronomers have long searched for a planet X. In the cold outer darkness of the solar system, gravity tugs where no planet is seen. Some models still hint at a hidden mass far beyond Pluto. But no evidence of Sitchin's inhabited world has ever appeared. The Nibiru of modern myth became a ghost planet, haunting both astronomy and conspiracy in equal measure. Yet the word Nibiru still glows in the tablets. Its older meaning, crossing or ferrying point, may speak not of a physical world but of transition, the threshold between heaven and earth, life and death, God and man. In this reading, Nibiru was not a planet at all. It was a bridge, a metaphysical orbit, the gate through which knowledge, and perhaps the gods themselves, passed to humanity. Whether planet or passage, Nibiru symbolised contact, an encounter between worlds. If it truly marked a crossing, then the question is not where it is, but when it last came close. Because each crossing the tablets warn brings change, floods, fire, renewal. Next we follow that warning into the geological record itself, to the scars of ice and fire left 13,000 years ago, when something struck the Earth and ended an age. Imagine standing on a frozen plain 12,800 years ago. The Ice Age is ending. Vast glaciers withdraw northward. Rivers carve new veins through the land. The air smells of thawing earth and wet pine. Humanity, still young, begins to dream of permanence. Villages, harvests, firelight that belongs to us alone. Then, without warning, the world ends. A brilliant light tears across the northern sky. It blossoms, splits, and becomes many. Seconds later, the heavens ignite. The shockwave is indescribable. The ice itself burns. Forests flash to vapour. Herds collapse mid-stride. The air fills with dust so thick the sun dies for months. Oceans surge inland. This was no myth. This was the Younger Dryas impact event, a real and terrifying turning point in Earth's history. For decades, scientists puzzled over a sudden, inexplicable plunge in global temperatures around 10,800 BCE. The planet, warming after the last ice age, was hurled back into near-glacial cold for another 1,000 years. Something enormous had happened, something violent enough to reshape continents. Then, in the early 2000s, researchers from the Comet Research Group began uncovering clues in the soil. A thin black mat, a layer of carbonized debris stretching across 4 continents. Within it lay microscopic diamonds, magnetic spherules and iridium, materials forged only under extreme heat and pressure, like those of a cosmic impact. At sites in North America, Greenland and Syria, the same layer appeared, dating precisely to the onset of the Younger Dryas. It was as if the Earth had been struck by a rain of fire. The implications were staggering. If true, this event annihilated megafauna like mammoths and saber-toothed cats, ended the Clovis culture in North America, and triggered floods of meltwater so vast they carved new seas. The world drowned, again. And across that flood, something extraordinary happened. Out of chaos, civilization emerged. In the centuries that followed, we find the first seeds of agriculture, the first megaliths, the first cities. It is as if humanity, traumatized by destruction, rebuilt from memory. But where did that memory come from? Ancient stories from every corner of the world echo the same refrain. A deluge, a fall of fire, a divine warning. The Popol Vuh of the Maya, the Mahabharata of India, the Book of Genesis, and the Epic of Gilgamesh all speak of an age ended by gods or stars. Could they all be describing this very moment? Was the flood of Utnapishtim not local myth but global memory, the human witness to an astronomical catastrophe? Consider Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, a stone sanctuary dated to the very end of the Younger Dryas, around 9600 BCE. Carved on one of its pillars is the so-called vulture stone, its animals arranged not randomly, but in the pattern of constellations. Recent analysis suggests it marks the sky as it appeared the night a comet shattered over Earth. If true, it means Göbekli Tepe was not only a temple, it was a monument to survival. Someone remembered. Someone rebuilt. The parallels are chilling. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of gods who send a flood to destroy mankind, of a survivor warned in secret by a sympathetic deity. Just as the comet hypothesis describes fragments raining down while humanity clung to the edges of extinction. And when the skies finally cleared, those survivors began to tell stories that would become scripture. The memory of impact transformed into divine punishment. The falling stars became gods descending from heaven. The survivors became kings, their knowledge mistaken for magic. So when the Sumerians wrote that kingship descended from heaven after the flood, perhaps they were not speaking metaphorically. Perhaps the heaven they described was the sky itself, lit by fire and ruin. Perhaps those who survived carried with them the relics of an older world, maps of the stars, mathematics, and myths of the beings they once worshipped as saviours. Because in that moment the old Earth died and a new humanity was born. Yet if cosmic catastrophe once shaped our past, what does it mean for our future? The sky has fallen before. Could it happen again? In the next section we'll look at the survivors of the deluge, those who may have carried the torch of the lost knowledge across continents. Their fingerprints appear not only in Mesopotamia, but in Egypt, the Andes, and beyond. The question is no longer if a civilization existed before the flood, but where it went. Dawn breaks over a wounded Earth, the firestorms have ended, the ice is melting, bleeding rivers into new oceans. What remains of humanity wanders through the smoke of a vanished age. The stars above look unfamiliar, as if the heavens themselves have shifted. From the chaos of extinction, small groups of survivors gather. They are scattered across mountains and islands, clinging to fragments of a world they no longer understand. Yet among them walk teachers, mysterious figures who appear suddenly in the archaeological record, carrying knowledge far beyond their time. It is these figures that ancient myth remembers as civilizing gods. To the Sumerians, they were the Anunnaki, the princes of heaven, descending after the flood to re-establish order. To the Egyptians, they were the followers of Horus, builders of the first sanctuaries along the Nile. And to the peoples of the Andes, they were the pale, bearded Viracochas who emerged from the waters after the sun returned. Different lands, same story, always after the flood, always bringing the light of the lost knowledge. Archaeologists call it the Neolithic Revolution, a sudden global shift from hunting to farming, from nomad to builder. It happens almost overnight, around 9500 BCE, at multiple locations unconnected by trade or migration. How could such a leap occur simultaneously across continents? Mainstream history calls it coincidence, but ancient texts whisper another version, that knowledge was restored, not discovered. That those who came after the flood, whether gods, survivors, or messengers, taught humanity to rebuild what was once known. In Sumer, the first post-Diluvian kings list themselves as direct heirs to these gods. After the flood had swept over and kingship descended again from heaven, kingship was in Kish. This is not the language of invention, it is the language of inheritance. Kish, Uruk, Eridu, these names rise from the tablets like resurrection chants. Each claims divine foundation, built upon older ruins lost beneath the flood silts of Mesopotamia. Excavations in Eridu, often called the oldest city on Earth, reveal temples stacked upon temples, each layer rising on the bones of the last. The earliest shrine dates back more than 7,000 years before Christ. Who taught the builders to raise such structures before writing? Before wheels? Before metal? The same mystery echoes in Egypt. The earliest pharaohs claimed descent from the Shemsu Hor, the companions of Horus, beings who ruled before the first dynasty. On the Palermo stone, one of Egypt's oldest records, a line of divine kings stretches back thousands of years before known history. Archaeologists dismiss them as myth. But what if they were the same survivors, the same heavenly kings, who reappeared across continents with the knowledge of a lost epoch? Consider this. The pyramid texts, Egypt's oldest religious inscriptions, speak of gods who sailed the heavenly waters and descended upon the island of flame. The parallels with Mesopotamian flood legends are uncanny, both describing celestial visitors, both emerging from destruction. And in South America, across an ocean the ancients supposedly never crossed, the Inca chroniclers tell of Viracocha, a radiant being who came after the waters, teaching people to plant, to build, to measure the heavens. His name, translated, means foam of the sea, born from the flood. How could these separate civilizations, thousands of miles apart, share the same Genesis story? Either humanity's trauma of the flood etched itself so deeply into our collective memory that we reinvented the same myth, or there truly were survivors who carried their story and their science to every corner of the New World. Even Plato, writing in Timaeus and Critias, repeats an uncanny echo of this idea. He speaks of Atlantis, a high civilization destroyed by floods and fire, whose survivors spread across the earth to teach the arts of civilization to the young races. Scholars call it allegory. But perhaps Plato was quoting something older, an inherited memory, passed down from Egypt's own priesthood. And what if those Atlanteans, those Anunnaki, those followers of Horus, were all fragments of the same lineage, the keepers of knowledge from before the Cataclysm? Mathematics, astronomy, megalithic engineering, these do not appear as spontaneous miracles. They are fingerprints of continuity. Across deserts and oceans, the same hand seems to draw the same patterns. The 72-degree tilt of the pyramids, the solar alignments of Göbekli Tepe, the precise 25,920-year precessional cycle encoded in monuments separated by millennia. Coincidence or communication? Perhaps those who survived the Younger Dryas were not just lucky. Perhaps they remembered why the world burned and dedicated their lives to preserving that knowledge. Not to worship the gods, but to become them. Next, we travel to Uruk, the shining city of Gilgamesh himself. There, myth and archaeology collide, revealing the moment when man first looked to the heavens and declared himself divine. The age of the gods had ended. Now began the age of kings. Imagine standing on the windswept plain of Mesopotamia, 5,000 years before Christ. The horizon shimmers with heat, broken only by the winding ribbon of the Euphrates. Then, there it is, rising from the dust like a vision. Colossal walls of mud brick glowing gold in the setting sun. Towers and ziggurats pierce the sky. Canals snake through gardens. The air hums with the chants of priests, the hammering of builders, the cries of merchants. This is Uruk, the first great city of Earth, the place where history, myth and divinity merged into one. According to the Sumerian king list, kingship descended from heaven to Uruk after the flood. Here, humanity rebuilt what was lost, stone by stone, tablet by tablet. It is in this city that writing, law, architecture and kingship itself emerge as if born fully formed. Uruk was more than a settlement. It was a cosmic mirror, a reflection of the heavens cast onto the earth below. Its ziggurat, the towering Eanna temple, was dedicated to Inanna, the goddess of love and war, the planet Venus, the morning and evening star. The very layout of Uruk mirrored celestial order, 7 sacred precincts, each aligned with the paths of the wandering stars. To walk its streets was to move through the architecture of the cosmos. Archaeologists date Uruk's explosive rise to around 4000 BCE, during what they call the Uruk expansion. In just a few centuries it grew from a small village into a metropolis of more than 50,000, a population unseen again until classical Greece. Its influence stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. The question is how? How did a society with no precedent suddenly master urban planning, mass agriculture, irrigation, metallurgy, and writing are all at once. Clay tablets found in Uruk's ruins provide clues. They record transactions, myths, hymns, and perhaps most importantly genealogies. Among them appears a name whispered through millennia: Gilgamesh, son of Lugalbanda, 2/3 divine. If these tablets are to be believed, Gilgamesh was no mere legend. He was a historical king, ruling Uruk around 2700 BCE. Excavations have even revealed a vast burial site beneath the city, what some believe could be Gilgamesh's tomb, sealed beneath the layers of silt deposited by an ancient flood. The soil itself seems to confirm the story carved into the tablets. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest written story in human history, is not simply a tale of adventure. It is a lament for lost immortality, for a world shattered by flood and time. In it, Gilgamesh searches for Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Deluge, hoping to learn the secret of eternal life. But beneath its poetry lies something far more haunting, the echo of a civilization remembering its own rebirth. When the tablets speak of the Anunnaki, the gods who decreed the fates of men, they describe them not as spirits, but as rulers. The word itself means those of a royal seed, or offspring of the heavens. These were not ephemeral beings, they were administrators, judges, and engineers of the cosmic order, and their temple, the Anna precinct of Uruk, was their throne on earth. Some scholars suggest the Anunnaki were simply deified ancestors, mythologized rulers of a vanished age. Others, like the late Zecharia Sitchin, believe they were something more, literal beings who once walked among us. Whichever truth one prefers, the result is undeniable. Uruk became the prototype of all future civilization. Its innovations, writing, accounting, taxation, temple administration are the skeleton of the modern world. Even our word city traces back to its Sumerian ancestor. In every sense, we live in Uruk's shadow, but beneath its grandeur an older mystery lingers. Some of the earliest tablets from Uruk refer to the Me, divine decrees of power and knowledge said to be held by the gods. The Me granted wisdom, kingship, architecture, and music. When Inanna brings them to Uruk, humanity awakens to civilization. To the ancients, the Me were sacred laws. To modernize, they read like blueprints, fragments of lost technology, or instructions for creation itself. Were the Me symbolic of abstract wisdom, or were they, as some fringe theorists suggest, remnants of a real, tangible knowledge passed down from a pre-flood world? Could Uruk's sudden rise be the reactivation of that inheritance, the moment humanity reopened a forgotten archive? Whatever the answer, Uruk marked a threshold. Here, man no longer prayed for the gods to return, he built their world himself. For the first time, humanity became creator, not creation. But as every ancient text warns, creation comes with consequence. The same knowledge that raised Uruk's towers also sowed the seeds of hubris. The king who sought eternal life would soon learn the cost of challenging the gods themselves. In the next section, we follow Gilgamesh beyond the walls of Uruk, into the wilderness of myth, to seek the secret of immortality and confront the truth of the flood that erased an age. Night settles over Uruk. The ziggurats glow faintly under the stars, each brick a prayer to eternity. High above the city, on a terrace of carved stone, stands Gilgamesh, the warrior king, the builder, the seeker. His gaze stretches beyond the horizon, beyond time itself. The tablets call him 2/3 divine, 1/3 mortal, a man born of both heaven and earth, a bridge between the gods and humankind. But even kings of divine blood cannot escape the whisper of death, and it is that whisper that drives him into legend. Gilgamesh's story begins not with triumph, but with arrogance. He rules Uruk with unmatched strength, yet his people suffer beneath his pride. To humble him, the gods create a mirror, a wild man named Enkidu, born of the steppe, clothed in animal hair, untouched by civilization. When the two finally meet, they clash like thunder. Days of combat end in friendship. In Enkidu, Gilgamesh finds the reflection of his own humanity. Together they embark on quests that echo through the ages. The slaying of Humbaba, guardian of the cedar forest. The killing of the bull of heaven sent by the goddess Inanna. But these victories come at a price. The gods decree that one must die. Enkidu falls ill, a punishment for defying divine order, and his death shatters the king. The words carved into clay tremble with grief. Shall I not die too? Am I not like Enkidu? Sorrow has entered my heart. I am afraid of death. It is here that myth becomes something deeper, the oldest philosophical cry ever written. For the first time, humanity asks not how to live, but why we die. Consumed by fear, Gilgamesh abandons his city and sets out across the world in search of immortality. His journey takes him beyond deserts and mountains, through the twin peaks of Mashu, where scorpion men guard the gates of the sun. He descends into the darkness beneath the world, crossing the cosmic sea to find Utnapishtim, the man who survived the Great Flood, the last immortal left among mortals. When he finally finds him, Utnapishtim reveals the truth. There is no permanence. The gods gave death to man, and life they retained in their own hands. He tells Gilgamesh the story of the deluge, how the gods, angered by human clamour, sent a flood to destroy the world. But one god, Ea, whispered to Utnapishtim in a dream, warning him to build a great boat and preserve life. It is the very story we know from Genesis, older by 2,000 years. In the end, Utnapishtim offers Gilgamesh a test. Stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, and prove yourself worthy of eternity. But the king falls asleep. Even the greatest of men cannot escape the nature of flesh. He's given one final chance, a plant that grants renewed youth, but it is stolen by a serpent while he bathes, leaving him broken and empty-handed. When Gilgamesh returns to Uruk, he stands before its monumental walls, the same walls he built with his own hands, and realizes the truth. Immortality was never in the flesh. It was in creation, in legacy, in the act of building the world itself. It's here that the line between man and God blurs completely. The Sumerians wrote not of perfection, but of striving, the eternal struggle between dust and divinity. Gilgamesh fails in his quest, yet through that failure he becomes eternal. His story endures when empires crumble and languages fade, and beneath his legend lies something else, a possible remembrance of the very beings who inspired it. In his journey beyond the mountains to the Sea of Death, he meets the gods who decreed the fates. Could these have been memories of the Anunnaki, the survivors of the pre-flood world, hidden in remote sanctuaries mistaken for deities by those who came after? Every ancient myth encodes geography, real places lost to time. The twin mountains of Mashu, for example, may correspond to the Zagros range, where early post-flood settlements like Jarmo and Shanidar have been found. Did Gilgamesh's journey record the last remnants of that forgotten network, the old world's last breath? If so, then the Epic of Gilgamesh is not only the oldest story ever told, it is a map, a record of transition between gods and men, between myth and memory. And when Gilgamesh stands before Uruk and whispers, "Look upon my works," he is not boasting. He is reminding us that the true immortality of man is remembrance itself. Because if the flood was the end of one world, Uruk was the beginning of another. But somewhere beneath its ruins, sealed in silt and stone, lies the question we have not yet answered. Was Gilgamesh the last of the gods, or the first of us? Next, we descend into the earth itself, following archaeologists as they unearth the city once thought to be pure legend, and uncover evidence that, deep in the southern Iraqi desert, where the Euphrates has long since shifted its course, a team of German archaeologists led by Jörg Fassbinder begins to scan the ancient site of Uruk using ground-penetrating radar. The war has just begun. The world's eyes are elsewhere. But beneath the dust, something stirs. The radar images reveal a vast network of walls, streets and canals, a ghostly echo of the world's first metropolis, still sleeping beneath the sand. And then, at the heart of it, the instruments detect something extraordinary. A rectangular chamber, sealed beneath layers of ancient river silt, surrounded by what appears to be a buried waterway, a literal river of death. The team freezes, for in the Epic of Gilgamesh the hero's body is said to have been laid in the riverbed, surrounded by offerings, entombed where the waters would forever flow around him. Could this be it? Could they have found the tomb of the world's first great king, the man who sought eternal life, and perhaps in legend, found it? Fassbinder's findings, reported briefly by the BBC, caused a brief but electrifying wave across the archaeological world. He described a structure resembling the descriptions from the epic itself, an enclosure complex surrounded by a former river channel. Satellite imagery seemed to confirm it, yet before any excavation could proceed, the Iraq War erupted in full. The site was abandoned, access was lost, and the story disappeared, quietly, abruptly, as if buried once more beneath layers of silence. To this day, no official excavation has reopened the tomb. What lay beneath Uruk remains one of the most haunting archaeological mysteries of our time. But let us look closer, not at rumour, but at the clues left in the soil and the text. Uruk's ruins are vast, spanning more than 1,000 acres. Beneath them lie multiple occupational layers stretching back to nearly 5,000 BCE. Within these layers, archaeologists have unearthed inscriptions naming kings and priests, and among them several bearing the name Gilgamesh. To the Sumerians, he was not a myth. He was listed as a ruler of Uruk who reigned for 126 years, placed immediately after the Great Flood in their king lists, and what's more, the ancient texts describe his burial with unnerving precision. They laid him in the riverbed, and the river was allowed to flow over him. The people of Uruk wept for him for 7 days and nights. In Sumerian ritual, water was sacred, the boundary between the living and the divine. To bury their king beneath a river was to return him to the gods. The currents would become his shroud, his protection, his eternal passage through the underworld. Fassbinder's radar discovery matches this description exactly. A rectangular chamber, a silted riverbed, stone walls beneath. It may be coincidence, or it may be the first archaeological confirmation of a story written over 4,000 years ago. But here's where it gets stranger. Shortly after the report, local accounts spoke of increased military presence near the site, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that artifacts, or even the sarcophagus itself, were removed under secrecy. No credible evidence supports this, yet the fact remains: the find vanished from public record. Why? Perhaps war, perhaps preservation, or perhaps, as the old myths warn, some knowledge is not meant to be unearthed. The very idea of Gilgamesh's tomb is a paradox, a grave for a man who sought to defeat death. If it exists, it is not just the resting place of a king. It is the physical link between history and myth, the bridge where imagination becomes evidence. And if Gilgamesh truly lived, then so perhaps did his world. The flood, the gods, and the divine laws of the Anunnaki that shaped the dawn of civilization. Every shovel of earth in Uruk doesn't just uncover bricks, it peels back the edge of our collective memory. But let's not romanticize too much. Archaeology is cautious, and rightly so. Without direct excavation, the tomb remains unverified. Still, the convergence of myth and data is tantalizing. The Epic says he built the walls of Uruk, measure them well. Science says those walls exist. The Epic says he lies beneath the river. Radar says something lies there. Coincidence or confirmation? The line blurs more each year, and so Gilgamesh may yet be waiting, not as a god, but as a man whose story became the axis of memory itself. The city that bore him became the cradle of kingship, and the flood that took his ancestors became the myth that birthed civilization. But what if Uruk was only one piece of a much older pattern? Because across the world, in Egypt, in South America, in the Indus Valley, the same sudden spark appears. Vast cities rising from nowhere, built by hands that seem to remember something older than time. In the next section, we follow that trail outward, to the global fingerprints of the same lost blueprint. A pattern that suggests the builders of Uruk were. Stand back from the map of the ancient world and something strange begins to emerge. Lines of stone and memory stretch across continents, whispering the same geometry. From the ziggurats of Sumer to the pyramids of Egypt, from the stepped temples of Mesoamerica to the megalithic rings of Britain, the pattern repeats. Each one built by a culture that, we are told, never knew the others existed. And yet, they speak the same language, a language of stone, of stars, of number. When Uruk rose from the floodplain, it was not alone. Around the same epoch, give or take a few centuries, the pre-dynastic Nile saw the sudden rise of monumental architecture. The Indus Valley birthed its precise grid cities, and in faraway Peru, the corral complex began to bloom with pyramids and plazas. No shared trade, no known contact, and yet all constructed around 3200 to 3000 BCE. How could this be coincidence? Did humanity, scattered by the Cataclysm, simply awaken to the same dream at the same time? Or did these builders inherit a common memory, the same lost blueprint handed down from an earlier vanished age? Archaeologists speak of cultural diffusion, but the scope defies easy explanation. Take the pyramids. The Great Pyramid of Giza, the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, and the Ziggurat of Ur all share the same symbolic proportions, a square base narrowing to the heavens. Each is aligned with the cardinal points, and many are astronomically tuned to solstices or the belt of Orion. The odds of that repeating pattern arising independently across oceans are astronomical. And the numbers? From Sumerian base 60 mathematics to the Mayas' 20-based calendar, both civilizations encoded the same celestial cycles. The precession of the equinoxes, the 25,920-year wobble of Earth's axis. How could such precision exist before telescopes, before metal, before recorded cross-cultural exchange? To the ancients, the answer was simple. They were taught. The Sumerians claimed the Anunnaki gave them the measurements of the heavens. The Egyptians said the god Thoth inscribed the laws of harmony and proportion. The Maya credited Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, with teaching them to track time itself. Different names, same motif, the bringer of knowledge descending from the sky. Even the myths of the builders are synchronized. Each culture tells of a flood. Each remembers a remnant of wise beings who survived and rebuilt. Each begins its calendar from that same moment, the rebirth of the world after destruction. It's as though human history was rebooted all at once under a single guiding hand. But here's where the puzzle deepens. Many of these ancient sites share mathematical constants, not in random measures, but in encoded geometry. The ratio of the Great Pyramid's height to its base equals half of pi. Stonehenge's circumference encodes lunar cycles. Teotihuacan's layout mirrors the orbital periods of Mercury, Venus, and Earth. These are not coincidences of architecture. They are expressions of a unified cosmology. Could it be that the survivors of the Cataclysm, the same keepers of knowledge who raised Uruk from the mud, scattered across the globe carrying fragments of a shared science? A knowledge of geometry, astronomy, and harmonics passed down through oral tradition until it became religion? If that's true, then the world's first cities were not isolated miracles. They were colonies of memory, outposts of an older civilization that refused to die. Mainstream academia resists this idea, arguing there's no hard evidence for a single progenitor culture. But the silence of absence does not erase the symphony of similarity. Archaeology uncovers data, myth preserves meaning, and when both point in the same direction, perhaps we should listen. Even modern science, with all its instruments, continues to stumble upon echoes of this design. Mathematicians studying fractals and sacred geometry find the same patterns in the DNA double helix, in the spirals of galaxies, in the ratios of human anatomy, as if creation itself obeys the same formula the ancients once intuited. Did they discover these principles through centuries of observation? Or did they remember them from something, or someone, before? Across the ages, the blueprint persists. It is in the temple, the pyramid, the cathedral, the circuit board. It is in us, in our architecture, our art, our mathematics. We keep building toward heaven because once, long ago, we stood beside gods who showed us how. If Uruk was the first great experiment, the prototype of civilization, then these echoes are its children, scattered to the winds by time. But if all these cultures share the same ancestral spark, the same memory of a golden age before the flood, then the true cradle of civilization may lie not in any one river valley, but beneath the waves that swallowed their first world. And if that's true, then the next step is inevitable. We must dive beneath the seas, into the ruins that defy explanation, to see whether the story of the flood was not just myth, but a map. Because the ocean hides more than shipwrecks. It hides the memory of who we were before we forgot. Imagine standing on a coastline that no longer exists. The air is heavy with salt and silence, and before you the ocean stretches endlessly. But beneath that mirror of blue lies a graveyard of stone. Pillars, temples, avenues, the drowned ghosts of entire civilizations. And here's the question that haunts archaeologists and mythologists alike. If humanity's oldest stories all speak of a world destroyed by floods, what if those floods actually happened, and the ruins still lie waiting beneath the sea? Our journey begins off the coast of India, where, in the early 2000s, sonar scans near the city of Dwarka revealed vast geometric formations stretching across the seabed. Divers soon found pottery shards, walls, and what appeared to be a harbour, all buried under 120 feet of water. Carbon dating of nearby samples suggested human activity more than 9,000 years old. To believers, this was not coincidence. This was Dwarka, the legendary city of Lord Krishna, swallowed by the rising seas after a divine war, a story preserved in the Mahabharata for millennia. If those dates are even close to accurate, then this site predates the earliest cities of Mesopotamia by several thousand years. But India is not alone in its secrets. Thousands of miles away, near the coast of Japan, divers discovered the Yonaguni Monument, a massive stone complex resembling terraces, steps, and platforms carved from solid rock. Its edges are eerily straight, its planes precise. Some geologists insist it's natural, the result of tectonic fracturing. But marine archaeologist Masaki Kimura disagrees. He argues it shows signs of intentional design, carvings, alignment, and even symbols that could mark human craftsmanship. If true, Yonaguni could date back 10,000 years or more, to a time when this entire region was dry land, before the ice sheets melted, before the world we know was born. Then there's Pavlopetri, off the coast of Greece, the oldest submerged city ever verified by archaeology. Streets, courtyards, tombs, all preserved beneath the waves, dating to around 3000 BCE. And in the Caribbean, the Cuban underwater structures, discovered by sonar in 2001, appear to map out geometric formations thousands of feet below the surface. Whatever they are, they lie beyond the known limits of human settlement at the time. Across the globe, the same pattern repeats, ruins appearing at depths that match the sea level rise at the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 years ago, the same period many now associate with the Younger Dryas Cataclysm. When the ice sheets melted, the oceans rose by over 400 feet, swallowing coastlines where early civilizations may once have thrived. Is it possible that the flood myths of Sumer, Egypt, and the Bible all echo this one global event, not as metaphor, but as memory? The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of a deluge that destroyed mankind. The Popol Vuh of the Maya recounts a flood of resin and darkness. The Mahabharata tells of seas consuming kingdoms, while the Book of Genesis preserves the same refrain. The waters prevailed exceedingly upon the earth. Every culture remembers, and beneath every ocean the evidence mounts. But here's where the mystery deepens, and the blueprint from Uruk re-emerges. Many of these submerged sites are aligned to ancient star patterns, just like their surviving cousins on land. The Yonaguni terraces point toward Orion's belt. The ruins off India align with Sirius. Even structures off the coast of Cuba seem to mimic constellations visible 12,000 years ago, as if their builders wanted the heavens to remember them when the waters came. Were these cities the coastal outposts of a forgotten civilization, the same culture whose remnants seeded Uruk, Egypt, and the Andes after the flood? Or are we simply reading meaning into coincidence, projecting myth onto geology? Science demands caution, but myth demands memory. And sometimes the two tell the same story, just in different languages. Oceanographers now estimate that nearly 20 million square miles of prehistoric coastline lie submerged, unexcavated beneath the world's seas. That's more than twice the area of the entire continent of Europe. It's as if an entire chapter of human history is hidden just out of reach, sealed under salt and time. If we could drain the oceans, what would we find? Cities older than Uruk, temples aligned to vanished skies. Proof that the flood was not the end, but the beginning, the reset of civilization itself. And maybe that's why these myths persist. Because every culture carries the same scar. The sea is our collective memory, the mirror where we see what we lost. So perhaps the true cradle of civilization isn't the Fertile Crescent, nor the Indus Valley, nor the Nile. Perhaps it lies deep beneath the waves, in the ruins that once touched the heavens, a world swallowed, but not forgotten. For as long as humanity has told stories, one name has haunted our imagination: Atlantis. A shining island empire, vast and wise, swallowed by the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. To most, it's fantasy, a moral allegory. But what if Plato wasn't imagining a myth, but remembering a memory? Let's rewind. Around 360 BCE, the philosopher Plato records a strange tale in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He claims the story came from Solon, the legendary Athenian lawgiver, who in turn heard it from the priests of Sais, Egypt, during his travels centuries earlier. They told him of a mighty civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar, a land that commanded fleets, knowledge, and power unlike anything since. It warred with early Athens, the priest said, before the gods, angered by its pride, unleashed the sea upon it. In a single day and night of misfortune, Plato writes, the island of Atlantis disappeared into the depths of the sea. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as allegory, Plato's lesson about hubris. But others couldn't ignore the uncanny detail in his account. Precise geography, advanced technology, and a timeline that placed Atlantis 9,000 years before Solon, roughly 11,600 years ago. That number, oddly enough, matches the very end of the Younger Dryas, the sudden global flood that marked the transition from Ice Age to civilization. Coincidence? Or connection? The same epoch that drowned the coastlines also birthed the oldest megalithic sites known: Göbekli Tepe, Jericho, Caral. The same span of years echoes across Sumerian flood tablets and Vedic hymns describing the age before kings. Every culture remembers a dawn that followed catastrophe, a rebuilding after the waters receded. Could these be fragments of the same event Plato immortalized as Atlantis? Let's look at the evidence. Plato described Atlantis as a vast island kingdom, ringed by concentric canals, rich in metals and sacred geometry. For centuries, explorers have searched for it, in the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, even Antarctica. But recent satellite imaging has drawn attention to a curious formation in the Sahara Desert, the Risha structure, also called the Eye of the Sahara. From the air it looks eerily familiar, a series of circular rings nearly 25 miles across, nestled deep in Mauritania's desert. Coincidence? Maybe. But the dimensions and proportions mirror Plato's account almost exactly. Even the surrounding geography, mountains to the north, an open plain to the south, matches description of Atlantis' setting. And here's the twist. In the distant past, the Sahara wasn't a desert. It was green, lush, full of rivers. Could the island Plato described have been a memory of this once fertile region? A civilization erased when the climate shifted, its ruins later mythologized by survivors? It's an intoxicating idea, but the implications are even more staggering. Because if Atlantis was real, it wasn't a lone empire lost to pride. It was the heart of a world-spanning civilization, one whose survivors seeded the myths and monuments of every later age. After all, how else do we explain the sudden reappearance of advanced architecture, astronomy and agriculture at the dawn of recorded history, right after a planetary flood? Some researchers, like the late Graham Hancock, have suggested that Atlantis was not a single place, but a network of coastal settlements erased by the rising seas. In his words, it's not that we've lost one city, but an entire chapter of the human story. That theory dovetails perfectly with modern sea level data. Between 12,000 and 10,000 BCE, melting ice caps caused ocean levels to rise by nearly 400 feet, enough to submerge tens of millions of square miles of habitable land. Imagine every major coastal city on Earth, New York, Tokyo, London, swallowed whole. That's what our ancestors lived through. And maybe that's the wound they turned into myth. Even ancient Egypt, often called the world's first enduring civilization, claimed its knowledge came from before the flood, from a time when gods walked the earth. The Sumerians said the same, the Mayans echoed it. All spoke of teachers from the sea who returned after catastrophe to rebuild the world. Were those teachers the survivors of Atlantis? Or someone else entirely? Science remains cautious, and rightly so. The evidence for a literal Atlantis remains circumstantial. But myths are not built on nothing. They are built on memory. And when the same memory echoes from Mesopotamia to the Andes to the Nile, we must ask, are we hearing imagination or recollection? If the cataclysm that ended the Ice Age wiped away an advanced civilization, then every city since, from Uruk to New York, is a flicker of its rebirth. And that means Atlantis is not just a lost island. It's a symbol of humanity's oldest truth, that everything built can be drowned, and everything drowned can rise again. But if the builders of Atlantis truly existed, their knowledge didn't die with them. It resurfaced, encoded in myth, in number, and in the sacred architecture of the ages. And in the next chapter we'll follow that thread, tracing how the wisdom of the gods became the secret sciences of the ancient world. Throughout the ruins of the ancient world, one question lingers like an echo carved in stone. How did they do it? How did the Sumerians, without wheels or iron tools, map the movements of the planets with uncanny precision? How did the builders of Egypt lift limestone blocks weighing hundreds of tons into perfect alignment with the stars? How did the Maya calculate the solar year to within seconds of modern atomic clocks? These were not isolated feats of ingenuity. They were fragments of a forgotten system, a science older than civilization itself. Let's begin where the written record begins. Sumer, cradle of kings and gods. The clay tablets found at Nineveh and Uruk don't just record trade or laws. They detail astronomical observations stretching back thousands of years before the invention of the telescope. The Sumerians mapped the ecliptic path of the sun, divided the sky into 12 sections, the origin of the zodiac, and tracked the cycles of Venus so precisely that modern astronomers still marvel at their accuracy. They called this knowledge the Me, divine decrees of civilization bestowed by the gods and guarded fiercely by their priest kings. To them, mathematics and astronomy weren't separate disciplines. They were sacred languages, ways to read the mind of the universe itself. A few centuries later, that same philosophy took stone form on the banks of the Nile. The Great Pyramid of Giza stands not just as a tomb, but as a theorem. Its dimensions encode the mathematical constants of pi and phi, the ratio of Earth's radius to its circumference, and even the orbital distance of the planet it sits upon. Coincidence? Maybe, but the precision is staggering, within fractions of a degree of true north. It's as if the builders knew the shape and size of the Earth long before we rediscovered it. And it doesn't end there. In the Andes, at Sacsayhuaman, cyclopean walls fit together so perfectly that not even a razor blade can slip between the stones. Each block is irregular, carved like a puzzle piece, locked in place without mortar. The site's elevation, 12,000 feet above sea level, makes its construction a miracle of engineering, even by modern standards. To the Inca, these weren't just fortifications, they were resonant structures, built to channel energy from the earth itself. The Egyptians called it Heka, the hidden science of divine order. The Greeks would later rename it Hermetic wisdom, the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great, who was said to have been the Egyptian god Thoth reborn. In Sumer, it was the realm of the Anunnaki, who measured the heavens and laid down the plans of Earth. Different names, same function, custodians of cosmic knowledge. But here's where the trail grows darker, because much of this knowledge was deliberately concealed. As civilizations rose, fell, and were conquered, the sacred sciences were absorbed into mystery schools, guarded by priesthoods and initiates who swore oaths of secrecy. From Babylon to Alexandria, from Pythagoras to the alchemists of the Renaissance, fragments of the same code persisted: geometry, proportion, resonance, celestial harmonics, all teaching that the universe is not chaos but music. According to this worldview, the gods weren't capricious beings on thrones of cloud. They were the laws of creation personified. To understand them was to wield their power. To misuse them was to invite destruction. Perhaps that's why so many myths end the same way, with knowledge lost in flood or fire, hidden until humanity is ready once more. Modern researchers have begun to glimpse how this could be true. Acoustic studies at Saqqara, Machu Picchu, and Chichen Itza reveal that ancient structures were designed with sound in mind, frequencies that resonate at harmonic intervals, amplifying voices, chants, and even heartbeat rhythms. It's as though the ancients understood the world not through equations, but through vibration, seeing matter and spirit as two frequencies of the same cosmic tone. Everything is vibration, wrote Hermes in the Emerald Tablet. By knowing the harmony, one commands the whole. Could this be the secret of the divine technology so often attributed to the gods? A science of resonance and proportion, physics and metaphysics intertwined, capable of moving stone and shaping consciousness alike. Some theorists, like John Anthony West and Robert Schoch, have argued that the Great Sphinx itself shows signs of water erosion, thousands of years older than dynastic Egypt, evidence that the knowledge behind these monuments predates the civilization that inherited it. If true, then the knowledge of the gods was not invention but inheritance, passed from a forgotten world that fell to the flood, preserved by initiates, and revived in stone. And perhaps this is what the ancients truly meant by enlightenment, not superstition, not myth, but the remembrance of a universal order humanity once understood, the secret science of creation itself. So what happened to it? Where did this wisdom go? And if fragments of it survived through mystery schools and secret orders, what were they really trying to protect? In the next section, we step behind the veil, into the Hermetic legacy and the shadowy brotherhoods who claim to carry the torch of the gods through the ages. When the temples of Egypt fell silent and the last high priests sealed their scrolls, something strange happened. The knowledge of the gods did not vanish. It went underground. Hidden in coded texts whispered through secret orders, it passed like a torch from age to age. This was the Hermetic legacy, the secret flame of a forgotten science, kept alive by those who dared to remember. Our story begins in Alexandria, around the 3rd century BCE. The city was a beacon, a crossroads of Greek philosophy, Egyptian mysticism, and Babylonian astronomy. In its vast library, scribes gathered every fragment of human knowledge, star maps, mathematical treatises, scrolls of magic and medicine. But among these, one collection stood apart, the Hermetica, a series of texts attributed to a mysterious figure named Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes. To the Greeks, he was the embodiment of wisdom, the one who taught that the universe is mind, and that all things are bound by correspondence. As above, so below, as within, so without. To the Egyptians, he was Thoth, the scribe of the gods, keeper of divine measurement, the same deity said to have written the book of coming forth by light, guiding souls through the afterlife. To others still, he was the last voice of the antediluvian world, a survivor of the flood, preserving the science of the stars in symbols and stone. The Hermetica taught that creation itself was mathematical, that sound, proportion and geometry were divine languages through which the mind of God could be known. But such teachings threatened the order of empires, and so, when the Library of Alexandria burned, the priests and philosophers who carried its secrets fled, scattering to the deserts, to Byzantium, to the mountains of Europe. They became the keepers of the flame. In time, their teachings resurfaced, disguised as mysticism, alchemy, and sacred geometry. The alchemists of the Middle Ages claimed to seek the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that could transmute lead into gold. But the true alchemists spoke in riddles. Gold, they said, was not metal but consciousness itself, the perfection of the human soul. Their furnaces and crucibles were metaphors for transformation, echoes of the same process described in the Hermetic axiom, solve et coagula, dissolve and recombine. Break down what is base, refine what is pure, the same principle that shapes stars and atoms alike. These hidden teachings filtered into secret brotherhoods, the Rosicrucians, the Templars, and later the Freemasons, each claiming descent from an older, unbroken line of wisdom. In their lodges and cathedrals, sacred architecture became scripture. Every angle, every proportion was a prayer. The Gothic cathedrals of Europe were not only monuments of faith, they were manuals of Hermetic geometry, stone resonators tuned to the music of creation. In their symbolism, the torch, the light of knowledge, became everything. It appears in the hand of liberty, in the seals of nations, in the rituals of initiation. To carry the torch was to carry memory, to guard the remnants of a truth too dangerous to die. And here's where history blurs into myth once more. Whispers claim that the Hermetic orders preserved fragments of pre-flood knowledge, star maps, geometric ratios, lost technologies of sound and energy. That through secret initiations, adepts learned not only philosophy but physics, encoded in allegory. To them, the gods were not supernatural beings but higher intelligences, architects of a cosmic order that could be replicated through understanding. Some researchers, like Manly P. Hall, believed the Hermetic tradition was humanity's oldest lineage of enlightenment, the spiritual DNA of civilization itself. He wrote, "The Temple of Wisdom has no door that cannot be opened by the key of reason." To the Hermetists, that key was correspondence, the recognition that every law of the heavens reflects in the human soul. In other words, we are the blueprint. The microcosm mirrors the macrocosm. The The secret of the gods was never hidden in the stars, it was hidden in us. But the Hermetic flame burned quietly, often in peril. During the rise of organised religion, these teachings were condemned as heresy. Many who carried the ancient wisdom were silenced, their texts buried or burned. Yet somehow the current survived, in monasteries, in secret manuscripts, in the minds of those who refused to forget. And then, during the Renaissance, the flame flared to life again. The Hermetic texts resurfaced in Italy, sparking a revolution in art, science and philosophy. Men like Leonardo da Vinci, Giordano Bruno and Isaac Newton were deeply influenced by Hermetic thought, seeing the universe as a living mathematical organism. It was no coincidence that the Age of Reason was born from the ashes of forbidden knowledge, because Hermeticism was never about magic tricks or superstition. It was about awakening, remembering what our ancestors once knew, that to know the cosmos one must know oneself. And so, the flame still burns, in every equation that maps the stars, in every cathedral that echoes with harmonic resonance, in every mind that dares to ask why. But the question remains, what if the Hermetic Brotherhoods were not only guardians of wisdom, but also of memory? A memory of a lost world and ancient science and the beings who first gave it to us? In the next chapter, we follow that shadowed current through the Renaissance, to the alchemists, inventors, and visionaries who may have been the modern heirs of Atlantis. The year is 1460. In a dusty monastery on the outskirts of Florence, a messenger rides in with a bundle of ancient Greek manuscripts, scrolls rescued from the ruins of Byzantium as the Ottoman armies closed in. Among them is a strange and forgotten text, written in a tone both divine and mathematical. It claims to reveal the workings of the universe itself. That manuscript was the Corpus Hermeticum, and in that moment, the flame of Hermetic wisdom, long buried beneath centuries of silence, flickered back to life. The man who would ignite it was Cosimo de' Medici, ruler of Florence and patron of the arts. Cosimo ordered the young scholar Marsilio Ficino to stop translating Plato immediately, and instead render this Hermetic text into Latin. He believed, as many did, that it contained the secret knowledge of the ancients, the Prisca Theologia, the first theology, older than Greece, older than Egypt, a wisdom that came from the gods themselves. When Ficino's translation spread through Europe, it was as though an ancient door had opened. Philosophers, artists and scientists began to speak in the language of the Hermetica, of correspondences, of divine geometry, of the music of the spheres. It was a revelation that nature was not chaotic but conscious, that mathematics, art and spirit were one and the same. The Renaissance was not just a rebirth of art, it was a resurrection of memory. Painters like Leonardo da Vinci infused their work with sacred proportion, mirroring the geometric ratios of the human body to the architecture of the cosmos. For Leonardo, to draw the human form was to map the mind of God. His notebooks are filled not with idle sketches, but coded studies of anatomy, hydraulics, and flight, the same interplay of mind and matter the Hermetists had spoken of. Meanwhile, across Europe, a strange convergence was taking shape. Magi, scholars, and scientists seeking the lost harmony of the world. One of the most enigmatic was John Dee, the court astrologer of Queen Elizabeth I. Dee was a mathematician, a navigator, and a mystic, a man who claimed to converse with angels through a crystal lens. But behind the mystical facade lay a deeper obsession, the recovery of an ancient pre-flood wisdom. Dee believed that knowledge itself was sacred, that the true language of the angels was mathematics. His house at Mortlake became a meeting point for thinkers and alchemists from across Europe. They sought not gold, but gnosis, divine understanding. Some believed Dee's mysterious Enochian language was an attempt to reconstruct the speech of the gods, perhaps even the very code by which reality was written.
And then came Giordano Bruno, philosopher, heretic, visionary. Bruno read the Hermetica and saw in it not superstition, but liberation. He declared that the universe was infinite, that every star was a sun with its own worlds, and that divinity flowed through all things. In his mind, God was not separate from creation, he was creation. For this, Bruno was condemned by the church and burned alive in 1600. Yet in that fire, the flame of forbidden knowledge only spread further. because just beyond that shadow stood Isaac Newton. We remember him as the father of modern physics, the man who decoded gravity and light. But few know that Newton filled more pages with alchemical symbols than with equations. He studied the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus and believed its words concealed the key to the universe. That which is below is like that which is above, to accomplish the miracles of the one thing. To Newton, this was not poetry. It was physics. He saw the laws of motion, optics, and alchemy as one continuous truth, the same divine mechanism that the ancients had glimpsed through geometry and myth. The Renaissance was not a rebellion against religion. It was a reconciliation, a recognition that science, art, and spirit were reflections of the same hidden order. The cathedral and the observatory were built from the same blueprint. To measure the stars was to measure the soul. But as the centuries turned, something changed. The flame that had burned bright in Florence and London began to dim under the weight of dogma. Not from the church this time, but from the new creed of materialism. The world was no longer seen as alive, but as a machine. The gods were banished, the mysteries reduced to equations. Yet buried within those equations, the ancient truths persisted, waiting for those with eyes to see. And so, as Europe marched toward the Age of Reason, the secret hermetic current flowed beneath it still, influencing secret societies, revolutionary thinkers, and even the architects of modern science. It was the quiet hum beneath history, the pulse of a memory that refused to die. Because perhaps the Renaissance was not the rebirth of knowledge at all, but its return. A whisper from before the flood, reminding humanity that what we call progress may simply be the rediscovery of something we once knew long ago. By the dawn of the 17th century, the world had changed. The age of cathedrals and alchemists had given way to the age of empires, of reason, expansion, and revolution. But beneath the marble and muskets, something older still moved. A current of symbols, rituals, and whispers. A secret order of minds who believed that the world itself could be shaped not just by politics, but by knowledge. They called themselves brethren of the craft, children of the widow, sons of light. To history, they would become known as the Freemasons. Their origins remain shrouded in myth. Some claim they arose from the stonemasons who built Solomon's temple, inheritors of sacred geometry itself. Others trace their lineage to the Knights Templar, the warrior monks who, after the Crusades, returned to Europe laden with relics and secrets from the East, knowledge they may have unearthed beneath the ruins of the Temple Mount. Whatever their beginnings, one truth endures. These brotherhoods carried the Hermetic flame into a new age. Inside their lodges, geometry, astronomy, and philosophy mingled with ritual and oath. Every symbol carved in their halls held meaning: the compass and square, the all-seeing eye, the unfinished pyramid. To the uninitiated, they were tools of architecture. To the initiated, they were diagrams of creation, blueprints of both the universe and the human soul, as above, so below. When the Enlightenment dawned, many of its architects were literal ones: masons, Rosicrucians, alchemists in new robes. Figures like Francis Bacon, Robert Boyle, and Isaac Newton moved seamlessly between science and esoterica, convinced that knowledge was the true divine instrument. The Royal Society, often hailed as the birthplace of modern science, was, in spirit, a temple of Hermetic thought. But as this light spread, it began to cast longer shadows. Whispers grew that these societies were not merely philosophical fraternities, but the hidden hands behind revolutions, kings, and nations. That their symbols were not just moral allegories, but marks of a secret agenda, stretching back to the first city of Uruk itself. In 1776, as thunder rolled across the Atlantic, 13 colonies declared their independence. But look closer at the document that birthed a nation, the seal of the United States, and you find a pyramid crowned with a single eye, encircled by the words Annuit Keptis and Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages. To some, it was a simple emblem of providence. To others, it was the signature of an ancient current, the same light of Hermes, now hidden beneath the language of liberty. Around the same time in Bavaria, another brotherhood emerged, the Illuminati, founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1776, the same year America was born. Their mission was not mystical, but ideological, to free the world from superstition and tyranny through knowledge and reason. Yet their methods were secretive, their influence shadowed. Rumors spread that their reach extended into courts, banks, and temples, that they sought to guide civilization toward a single, unified ideal. Whether true or not, their story became myth, fusing forever the idea of hidden architects shaping the course of humanity. And so, from the Enlightenment onward, history developed two faces. One visible, of kings, scientists, and wars. The other hidden, of lodges, ciphers, and symbols. Together, they formed a dual architecture of power. The exoteric world we see, and the esoteric one we don't. Even today, the fingerprints of these societies linger everywhere. In the city grids aligned to ancient stars, in the domes and obelisks that mirror constellations, in the dollar bill, in the Capitol dome, in the whispered phrases etched into marble, echoes of a symbolic language spoken by the architects of empire. But what if their true goal was not domination, but remembrance? What if, through ritual and symbol, they were preserving something far older than any empire? A fragment of pre-flood knowledge, hidden in plain sight. Some researchers believe these orders inherited not just the Hermetic philosophy, but fragments of Atlantean science, the idea that human civilization was born from contact with higher intelligences. Their great work, as the alchemists called it, was not merely to perfect the self, but to restore the world to its original design. The building of cathedrals, temples, and nations, all reflections of the same sacred geometry. Others dismiss it as myth, coincidence, pattern-seeking. Yet, the question lingers. Why do the same symbols, the eye, the pyramid, the serpent, the star, appear in every age, under every empire? Perhaps because they point to something universal, something we once knew, but forgot. And as history marched toward the industrial age, the hidden architects stepped deeper into shadow, their symbols woven into the fabric of modernity, their influence both denied and immortal. Because the true power of a secret is not that it is hidden, but that it is forgotten. Imagine the sound. A low hum of iron, a thunder of wheels, the hiss of steam rising from newly born machines. The 19th century had dawned, and with it, a new kind of fire. Not the sacred flame of Hermes or the torch of enlightenment, but the cold, relentless blaze of industry. In the space of a few decades, the world transformed. What had once been the alchemist's dream, to command the elements, was now achieved by engineers and inventors. Metal replaced marble, smoke replaced incense. And where once the cathedral stood as the symbol of human aspiration, now the factory rose. A new temple to a new god, progress. But progress, as it turned out, demanded sacrifice. The Industrial Revolution did not simply change the world, it changed the human spirit. For thousands of years, knowledge had been the domain of mystics, sages, and seekers who believed that truth was not only to be understood, but experienced. Now, it was measured, cataloged, and sold. The language of the cosmos, once sacred geometry and symbol, became the language of statistics, profit, and production. Science, which had been born from the Hermetic dream of unity between heaven and earth, was stripped of its soul. The cosmos was no longer seen as alive, but as a vast, indifferent machine. The alchemist became the chemist, the astrologer, an astronomer, the magus, a mathematician. And while the discoveries of this new age were breathtaking, electricity, locomotion, the telegraph, something ineffable was lost. The world had been disenchanted. Yet even here, in the soot and smoke of progress, the hidden current still flowed. Some inventors, visionaries on the edge of science, seemed to tap into something otherworldly. Nikola Tesla spoke of visions that guided his inventions, flashes of entire machines appearing in his mind as if given from beyond. He believed the universe was a vast sea of energy, a kind of living intelligence, ideas that echoed the ancient Hermetic notion of a world soul. Tesla once said, "My brain is only a receiver." In the universe, there is a core from which we obtain knowledge, strength, and inspiration. He was dismissed by many as eccentric, but others recognized in him the last of the true alchemists, a man bridging the invisible with the tangible, the mystical with the mechanical.
Meanwhile, secret societies that had once guarded ancient wisdom adapted to this new industrial world. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, and later the Theosophists began to merge spiritual symbolism with scientific vocabulary. The cosmos was now described in terms of vibration, frequency, and energy, but behind the terminology, the old truths lingered, that all matter is mind, and all form is expression. The Theosophical movement, led by figures like Helena Blavatsky, revived the idea of lost civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria, and forgotten ages of light. She wrote of cosmic cycles, of beings who guided humanity's evolution, and of a universal wisdom preserved in fragments around the world. To some, she was a prophet, to others, a charlatan. But to all, she represented a return of something ancient, the echo of the pre-flood memory resurfacing in a world of steam and steel. As the machines multiplied, so too did humanity's confidence. We built railways across continents, wires across oceans, and factories across empires. We split the atom and electrified the night, but for every triumph of invention, a silence deepened, the silence of mystery. The stars that once sang in harmony with the soul were now reduced to cold orbs of gas. The gods who had once walked among us were dismissed as myth. The sacred and the scientific, once intertwined, now stood estranged. And yet, beneath the surface, patterns persisted. The architecture of world's fairs, government buildings, and banking halls still followed ancient geometry. Circles, domes, pyramids. The obelisks of Egypt rose again, this time in London, Paris, and New York. Even as modernity declared the death of magic, its symbols quietly multiplied. Perhaps the architects of this new world, knowingly or not, were still guided by the same geometry, the same law of correspondence. As above, so below. Even the age of machines could not escape the ancient design. By the dawn of the 20th century, humanity had become the new creator god. Electricity was our lightning, engines our thunder, and the city our temple. But for all our brilliance, a haunting question began to stir beneath the iron and glass. Had we built a world of light or of shadow? Because in the hum of machinery and the flicker of electric lamps, some began to sense a strange emptiness, as if, in mastering matter, we had forgotten spirit. As if, in building upward, we had lost sight of where we came from. And so, the Hermetic flame did not die. It went into hiding once more, waiting for another age to remember. For even the machine, in its way, is a mirror, a reflection of the same universal intelligence that shaped the stars. And perhaps hidden in its gears and wires is the same secret that has followed us since the dawn of civilization. That creation, whether by God, man, or machine, always begins with a spark. There is an old Sumerian saying etched into clay nearly 5,000 years ago. The gods who created us have long departed, but their footprints remain, and perhaps that is the truth that has haunted humanity since the dawn of memory, the echo of something greater, older, watching from beyond the veil of time. From the floodplains of Uruk to the towers of modern cities, the same story has repeated itself again and again. Creation, collapse, and rebirth. Every age believes itself to be the first, and every ruin whispers otherwise. The tale began with Gilgamesh, the mighty king who sought eternal life. His journey was not just the first story ever written, it was humanity's oldest question. Who made us, and why must we die? He sought the wisdom of the gods, but found only the truth of the flood, the memory of a cataclysm that swept away the world before ours. And in that flood, our ancestors may have lost not just their homes, but their history. From that silence rose the temples of Sumer, Egypt and Babylon, each built as a mirror of the heavens, as if trying to remember a lost design. Their gods were the Anunnaki, the shining ones who descended from the sky and gave order to the chaos below. Were they deities, teachers, or something stranger still? The texts do not say plainly, only that humanity was made to serve, to build and to learn. And perhaps when the floodwaters receded, we inherited not only their tools, but their mission. Thousands of years later, that same divine geometry resurfaced in the temples of Greece, the pyramids of Mexico, and the forgotten cities of the Andes. Different cultures, different tongues, but the same mathematics, the same star alignments, the same stories of gods descending from the heavens to seed civilization. Coincidence? Or continuity? The Hermetic philosophers of Egypt called this knowledge the Prisca Sapientia, the first wisdom. They said it was not invented, but remembered, that every age of man is a reflection of a previous one, each separated by fire and flood, and that one day the cycle would turn again. When the Industrial Age rose from the ashes of alchemy, we thought we had outgrown myth. But our machines became new idols, our data new oracles, our algorithms new gods, and still the question remains, the same that haunted Gilgamesh in his endless quest. Have we created, or merely recreated? Modern science tells us that around 12,800 years ago, a comet struck the Earth, the Younger Dryas Cataclysm, a flood of fire and ice that wiped clean the world. And yet, across the globe, the oldest myths, from Sumer to the Hopi, from the Maya to the Maori, all speak of the same deluge, the same rebirth. Could it be that our ancestors were not warning us of myth, but recording memory? If so, then our civilization, with its satellites and skyscrapers, is just the latest verse in that endless song. A song about creation, arrogance and renewal. And now, in the quiet hum of the digital age, something extraordinary is happening once more. Humanity is reconnecting, sharing stories, discoveries and dreams faster than ever before. We are decoding genomes, peering into black holes, resurrecting extinct species, and manipulating the building blocks of life itself. In our quest for knowledge, we have once again become the architects of destiny. But as we approach the threshold of a new age, an age of artificial intelligence, interplanetary travel, and post-human ambition, we must ask the oldest question of all. Are we becoming the gods we once worshipped? Or are we awakening as the children of the gods who made us? Perhaps the truth is neither, or both. Perhaps the gods were never beings of flesh or light, but symbols of consciousness itself, reflections of our highest potential, waiting to be remembered. The Anunnaki, the Hermetists, the Masons, the Magi, all reaching for the same eternal spark, the divine intelligence that sleeps within the human mind. And if that's true, then maybe the return of the Forgotten Age is not a prophecy of destruction, but of remembrance. A moment when humanity finally recognizes that the knowledge of the gods was never lost. It was buried within us, waiting to awaken. So when we look up at the stars, the same stars that guided Gilgamesh, that reflected in the waters of Atlantis, that watched over every temple ever built, we might realize that the story was never about them at all. It was about us, our rise, our fall, and our eternal return. Because history, like the heavens, moves in cycles. And one day soon the wheel may turn again, and when it does, may we remember who we were, what we lost, and what we were always meant to become. As above, so below, as within, so without, the miracle of the one thing,